Good morning. My name is Ron Collins. I'm the Vice Mayor of San Carlos, and the purpose of our meeting today is to learn about wildfire threats and preparedness and provide input to the city and the fire department on how that input will be captured and used. But before we continue, I'd like to introduce several people that are here from the city. First, our city staff. Our Assistant City Manager, Tara Peterson, Amy Newby, Parks and Recreation Director, Steve Machida, Director of Public Works, Lou Duran, also with the Public Works Department, Nolene Powers, who I believe is is it Emergency Services? Something like that. And Nakaya Nachman, who is the Assistant to the City Manager. Also from San Carlos Fire Department is Dave Pucci, who is a Deputy Fire Chief and San Carlos Chief, and Stan Maupin, who is the Police or Fire Chief of Redwood City Fire, of which San Carlos is a part. Also from our Sheriff's Department is Deputy Jacob Trickett, all right, over here. Every time I look at him, though, I feel old, so we have a lot of young people here. I would like to also mention that this meeting is being filmed, and it'll be for the benefit of our community and any members that obviously could not attend. But just before I introduce our facilitator, and one other thing I would like to add is that Peninsula Conflict Resolution Center has been hired as a neutral facilitator to lead and manage this meeting. But many of you know who live here that San Carlos, like many other communities, is not immune from wildfire threat. I was just talking to my next door neighbors who also happened to be here, and they had friends and relatives that lost homes up in Paradise. We had friends that lost homes in Santa Rosa. Just because we are a bedroom community relatively far away from the hills, we are not immune as well. So it is important that we talk about this, and having grown up here in town and lived on Plymouth Avenue, which is right at the base of Devonshire Canyon, I saw that canyon burn when I was 20 years old, and it was not a pretty sight. All right. I'm now going to turn the meeting over to Debbie Schechter. She is from PCRC, and she's going to explain how the meeting is going to work and how everybody will be able to express their issues and concerns. Debbie?
Thank you, Ron, and thanks everyone for coming out on a beautiful Saturday morning. As Ron said, I'm Debbie Schechter. I'm with the Peninsula Conflict Resolution Center. We are a nonprofit serving San Mateo County. We do communication, community engagement, and conflict resolution. Like we are doing today, we work with communities to help them get engaged in the issues that affect them. My role today as facilitator and the role of the small group facilitators at your table is to be a neutral third party to guide the process of the meeting so that you all can participate, share your ideas and views and concerns with the city and the fire department.
Good morning, everybody. Just to remind you, my name is Dave Pucci, and I'm the Deputy Fire Chief with the Redwood City Fire Department. And through contract, we provide fire services to the city of San Carlos. So I act as the department head for the city of San Carlos whenever there's reports to council or anything like that. And that's kind of my role within the San Carlos Fire Department. So you guys I'm sure you're familiar that you have two fire stations in the city of San Carlos. And those are stations 13 and 16. You got one on Laurel and one on Alameda. And those are the ones that I manage. As part of a bigger picture, we have 7 stations for the Redwood City Fire Department. And then we'll talk a little bit about the bigger picture of what fire services looks like throughout San Mateo County. In order to kick this off, I'm going to drive the cameraman nuts just for a second here. But what I wanted to start off with is some of your responses concerning what preparation you have done for wildfire preparedness. So the first question that we asked you is, have you prepared a personal family emergency plan? And probably about 6 to 1, we have responses that you have not yet. And that's going to be one of the big things we're going to be talking about today. Have you ever planned escape routes and alternative routes? And also, that's probably about 6 to 1 that you have not done that. So we're going to talk extensively about evacuation plans, personal evacuation plans, and your personal family plan that you can put together. And then the last one is, do you manage the vegetation around your home? And this is really good news. The vast majority of you do, whether it's through a HOA or personally. And we're going to talk about what the city is doing for vegetation management, what our enforcement posture is for vegetation management on private property, and how that all fits together with our city parks and some of the efforts the city is doing right now. So we're going to talk a little bit about what's been going on in the state. You guys have probably seen quite a bit of things on the news that are pretty alarming over the last couple of years, right? We've seen some pretty dramatic differences in the way fire behaves in California, and there's a number of reasons for that. And it's also led to some pretty catastrophic results. So let's talk a little bit about the state. So we know that with climate change, increasing temperatures, we had a pretty sustained drought there. And what the drought did in many parts of the state was it weakened a lot of the trees where they're susceptible to bark beetle and other diseases. And when you look at areas like Mariposa County in the Central Valley area, you see huge swaths of trees that are just brown. And there is a huge amount of fuel out there that is just dead trees. And what dead trees do over the wintertime is when it rains on them, they moisten up a little bit, but not like live trees. So when the summer rolls around again, you see that the live trees are able to maintain that moisture that they've picked up over the course of the winter, but the dead trees pick up a little bit, and when the heat picks up and the winds pick up, they dry out very quickly. So we still have a massive fuel problem in many areas of the state. The good news for out here is we don't have big areas of tree kill, but that is a big part of the state. So that is part of the reason why you're seeing some of the behavior in different parts of the state. So it's great that we had the rain that we did, or that over the whole summer. But what do you guys see when you drive along 280 nowadays? Lots of green, and it looks really good. I just got back from Santa Barbara and San Luis Obispo yesterday, and it's beautiful green rolling hills with a really big grass crop. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about predictive services and what they're saying. So this is it only goes up to 2012, but we can certainly anecdotally talk about what it's looking like going forward. But from the early 70s, that's when it really was predominantly in Southern California, and this is where our incident command system came from. We started having a lot of wildfires in Southern California, and we developed this whole management system that we still use today for large events. And back in the early 70s, you can see what the fire season kind of looked like. So this is kind of like the length of the year that we experience fire. And over the course of, through 2012, what we can demonstrate here is that we've had a significant, it's a 92-day increase in the amount of what we consider fire season, okay? Now, since then, what I can tell you is over the last couple of years, I've been on fire. Last year, I was on a fire in Malibu in December. The previous year, I was in a fire in November. We're sending strike teams out routinely in November and even December, and then we see that a little bit of a drop-off January, February, March when it really gets rainy. But for California, essentially what we're seeing is a year-round fire season. We used to, when I first got hired in the fire department, we had a period of time in the year where we said, okay, fire season's officially open now. Go ahead and put the wildland hose and all your yellows on the rig, and we're going to keep it on there. And now we just keep it on year-round because you never know. We see it just goes on and on. So, and we're seeing really significant events in November and December, as you know, with Paradise and everything else. With those major events, even though we haven't had a major event locally, we do participate in the statewide response system. So the firefighters from San Carlos and Redwood City, as well as several people who do management functions within these large campaign fire responses, we routinely go out. So we actually do have a lot of local experience. We have many of our firefighters have been on those major fires in the North Bay, in Santa Rosa, in Paradise. We were all responders on that fire. So we do have that experience to bring back. So what's changed? So we already talked a little bit about the increased temperatures, right? That's what the scientists are telling us with global climate change. We're seeing differences in the way fire behaves. Actually, for the first time, it was year before last, when we go to major fires, you get something that's called a fire behavior analyst. And what that person does is they go out and they check the fuel moistures in the area that's actually burning. And they check the weather and the humidity and all the different things. And they will tell us, this is what the fire is going to do tomorrow, okay? And for the first time, I believe it was 2 years ago, we have charts that we use. And the charts the fire behavior started exceeding the parameters of the charts that we've been using for decades. And that's because of those dry fuel moistures and the fire behavior that we're seeing and the winds and the dryness. So one of the when I was in Los Angeles 2 Christmases ago for a fire, the fire behavior and the weather, the meteorologist told us that the moisture recovery was actually better on the surface of Mars than it was in Los Angeles County on that day. And it was really interesting. You wash your hands and you could shake them and they would be dry. It was pretty amazing. So we're seeing some significant changes that way. Wind events. Wind events are, that's what we get really alarmed about. We're going to talk about what drives fuels. But when we have these changes in weather, when we start getting those hot, dry northerly winds, that's when we become very concerned. That's what drives fires in a big way. Wildland-urban interface development. I got a couple pictures coming up in a couple slides that show you San Carlos from the 1970s and San Carlos today. There's a lot more people in California. There's a lot more traffic in California, right? Especially around here. And all those people need a place to stay. And we're seeing development going further and further out. So small towns in the Central Valley have been growing, areas like Tracy and Stockton and all those for people that want to be super commuters. But we also have a lot of people who are building on hillsides and everything in our local communities. What do I mean by legacy infrastructure? One of the big concerns that we hear over and over again is we have some really small dead-end roads, right? Some of the roads that we see in Redwood City and San Carlos are old logging roads from back in the day. They were there in the 20s and 30s, and they eventually turned into a street, and someone decided to build a house off to the side of the road. And that's how that legacy infrastructure was built out. It was never built out with somebody thinking we could have a wildfire here someday. Back in the day, they were just worried about logging. So now it's all about wildfire. Never built with that purpose in mind. And it's there. If somebody wanted to build a new street today, what would we make them do as the fire department? What does the fire code require of them? If they're going to build a new home today or a new street, which we see, the street has to be 20 feet wide and needs to have 13 and a half feet clearance. And that's what someone would have to be able to demonstrate they can build into that neighborhood when they do that. So that is current, but again, the legacy infrastructure is still there. We talked about the length of fire season, just definitely getting longer, and then they're actually seeing some changing in the vegetation. And so with fuel modeling is changing in California. You hear the term desertification. That's some areas that were when it burns, the same kind of fuel model is not going to grow back. It's going to be something different. One thing I do want to mention, just because it popped in my head about it, when we start talking about, I get a lot of comments from the community, a lot of emails that I reply to, and a lot of people want to clear cut huge swaths of land around their homes, okay, or take out the trees and remove the brush down to a very low level. We have to remember that no matter what actions we do, when it comes to fuels management, planning, everything, we're always subject to having a fire. So last Christmas time when I was in Malibu, that was a desert interface fire. We're going to talk about urban interface fires here today because that's what applies to us. We have trees, we have shrubs. Well, in Malibu, that fire burned to the ocean within about 12 hours, and that was a desert interface fire. So California burns. California will continue to burn. We just have to do what we can to be best prepared for it. So what kind of history do we have for San Carlos? So this is the 1970s, and what that little red area is, that's a fire history map. So for decades within California, what they do is when they have a fire, we always map it, right? When you on the news, you hear about this is the updated acreage for XYZ fire on this day. This is the expected containment, et cetera, et cetera. So we also maintain fire history maps, and what this fire history map shows is a fire that started right around Kings Court. It burned up towards Melody and Crestview, but it was less than 1,000 acres, so there's not a lot of really good data out there. But what we tend to see throughout the state is fire history repeats itself. So this is an area, definitely an area of concern for us. This is an aerial view that we were able to find with some friends at CAL FIRE, and it's really hard to see, but that's basically that 280 corridor, and not a lot of structures in there, right? That looks a little different than today. There's just more people all throughout here. This next picture, I have it in there because it just looked really cool. These are still World War II era aerial aircraft doing water drops. So we talked about the fire hazard map. Okay, this is the San Mateo County Fire Hazard Map. You can find this on the CAL FIRE website. It's linked on our fire department website. And what it shows is these red areas here. That is your high fire hazard area. And then the pink areas are elevated areas. So just for a little bit of orientation, you got Half Moon Bay over here. So they've got some areas of concern along the coast. And they've just got some really big open space. The gray area, these are the areas that are just really built out, where there is not a really urban interface issue. And then as you get in here, this is that 280 corridor, Alameda. You see a lot of communities up and down the peninsula have areas of concern that are considered high fire danger areas. The good news is within San Mateo County, all the agencies work really, really closely together. So the fuels management problem that we have in Redwood City or San Carlos is the same one that Hillsborough might be dealing with, a Burlingame. So we work a lot in partnership rather than all of these different departments doing the same thing at the same time. We partner a lot on different things. So let's zoom in to San Carlos. So this is essentially the Alameda corridor and then going west, okay? So everywhere in there is a high fire danger area. And that makes sense, right? When you think about your neighborhoods and you think about the brush and the trees growing in the area, it makes it for a very beautiful area to live. But there is that wildfire threat. So what drives fires? So when we look at the neighborhoods, we have different fuel models. And the models will all behave differently. Some of our heavy timber slash, you got brush models and all that stuff. So you look at what fuel is available to burn. And I mentioned earlier, wind is always a big driver of fire, right? When we start getting those red flag warnings and you feel that hot, dry wind, you know that might be fire behavior, a problem for that day. Topography, fire likes to burn uphill, right? Because as it goes uphill, it's preheating those fuels ahead of itself, and that's what makes it be able to advance. And what we see when we see really aggressive fire advancements is when you get what we call wind in alignment with the topography, right? So if you have the wind that's blowing up canyon and it's pushing that fire uphill with a big fresh source of oxygen to be able to push that fuel, that's when we see what we call a run. We'll see fire advance very, very quickly, okay? And then the other major issue is areas that used to be brush and trees now have homes spotted throughout. So we mentioned the good news is we're not considered in drought. This is the current drought map for California. And we see that we got some areas really with the yellow, the southern end of the state, the northern end of the state have more to do with aquifers as opposed to fuel moisture. So essentially the drought is over, but it gave us a really good grass crop, right? So current predictive services for our area specific to San Carlos and Redwood City is they are predicting an above normal fire season for our area from June through October, okay? It's kind of a loose term. It's just saying we have a big grass crop and it's going to go. So our response in the county. So the really good news is that in San Mateo County, we have what's called a borderless system, okay? When you call 911, it doesn't matter what agency is written on the door, you're going to get the closest resources delivered to your emergency, whether it's a medical emergency, a structure fire, or a wildland response, okay? We routinely work with our neighboring agencies on fires throughout the year. We train together. It's a very seamless operation. Our engines are very, very similar in the way that they're equipped. We basically behave like one big San Mateo County Fire Department. We have more resources than San Jose or San Francisco. We have a lot of resources in this county, one dispatch center. And so when you see big events like the San Bruno gas pipeline event, for that we had 8 alarms and 2 strike teams of engines that came in from out of county. And we were still able to meet our response times throughout the rest of the county. For years ago, I forget what year it was, but there was a fire up in Woodside Road on Albion Road that turned into, it was a 6-alarm grass fire response with a bunch of CAL FIRE resources. And then at the same time, we had a 2-alarm structure fire response going on in Woodside. And throughout San Mateo County, there were 62 other incidents, people calling for heart attacks, whatever the emergency was, and we were still able to maintain a response times for those too. So we have a very robust system in San Mateo County, and it's very good for us. So what happens is, that's our local fire response. There are areas that are called mutual threat zones in SRA. You see down below it says state response area. There are parts of San Mateo County that are the primary jurisdiction of the state, CAL FIRE. Okay, so if there's an incident on that piece of dirt, that's a CAL FIRE response. We'll respond to support them, but it's ultimately their jurisdiction. That's what SRA means. Mutual threat zones means we get it. We're all in this together. Fire doesn't care if it starts in San Carlos or Redwood City or the county. It's mutually threatening to all of us. So we're all going to commit resources to that response. Over the course of fire season, CAL FIRE out of Felton does multiple weather readings during the day between humidity, temperature, wind direction, and wind speed, and they come up with what the threat level is based on weather. And our response will actually change based on the weather report at that particular time. It changes like 3 times a day. On high fire danger areas, not the area, it's independent of the area, but based on the weather, on high fire weather days, you can get 15 plus engines as well as multiple aircraft taking off at initial dispatch. When you're telling the dispatcher on the phone, I see a fire in a tree, that all happens right up front. So you will get a massive response initially. We don't assume something is not a big deal. We assume something is a big deal, and we'll very quickly downscale after that once we get there and determine that it's not a threat, or we were able to extinguish it. So that changes multiple times a day all throughout summertime, or until the rain starts again. So aircraft and crews, we do have quite a bit of aircraft available. It's immediately around us. It also changes over the course of the year when you start thinking about multiple fires throughout the state that will draw down from different parts of the state. But we have that is available locally, and it's not uncommon to see helicopters and aircraft over San Mateo County just because of the type of reported incident. We use the incident command system as a seamless way to manage incidents. It allows us to integrate with other fire agencies. It allows us to integrate with our law enforcement partners and to be able to manage very effectively what we do on the fire ground. Law enforcement and OES, their role when we're talking about a major fire, what is law enforcement's role in that fire? What is OES's role? What we're really talking about is evacuation, alert, and warning, and we'll have the sergeant comment on that in just a little bit. And then once we actually build an incident, we are self-contained in that we manage very effectively what resources we're bringing into the incident and releasing. And we work with mutual aid partners throughout the state, okay? Communications. There's a huge advantage for us having one communication center in San Mateo County because all the fire agencies share the same frequencies. So I can go on a structure fire in Daly City this afternoon and feel totally comfortable knowing what channel, who's going to be talking on what channel and when and for what reason. And incident complexity. What that means is in the state of California, if you recall after 2001, September 11th, the president decided that he was going to have this big national response framework and that every state was going to utilize resources the same. Well, what the federal government did in 2001 was look at California and says California does this every summer over and over and over again, and the system works really, really well. So they changed it, called it the National Response Framework, and copied California. So that was pretty good for us because we didn't have to learn something new. Folks in Louisiana and every other parts probably didn't like us very much because they had to learn our system, but that was the presidential directive at the time. So our response system in this state is very, very strong. I have been on multiple large-scale fires where I've been on scene with 8,000 plus firefighters. Last summer, I was on a fire up in Shasta County where we had hand crews from Australia and New Zealand because that's how far out we needed to reach to be able to get the resources that we needed. And they were great crews to work with. You just couldn't understand a word that they said on the radio. So we have a system that we actually use every single summer that can go international to be able to get the resources that we need. So it's a very, very robust system. So let's talk a little bit about evacuation. So planning for evacuations. So one of the things that we are going to heavily emphasize today is for every different household, you'll probably see the need for the evacuation plan to be just a little bit different, okay? And that's because some people have kids, some people drive, some don't. Some people have medical issues. Some people live in an area where there's multiple ways out, and other people live in areas where there might be one way out. So what do you do with that? Let's talk a little bit about what the reality is when it comes to evacuation. First off, in the initial stage, our station gets rung down, and it says we have a grass fire in XYZ street, okay? We're going to start rolling that way, and it's going to take us probably about 3 or 4 minutes or so to get there. And on the way, we might even see a column of smoke. And we're going to have a reported location. But until we get there and actually say and see this is what's happening, this is what's threatened, that's going to be the first time we have enough intelligence to be able to say, this is the area I want evacuated, okay? And initially, what we saw in Paradise and Santa Rosa is the incident was evolving so rapidly that being able to, it's kind of like a soup sandwich. You're trying to wrap your hands around what's going on, and it's changing minute by minute, okay? So what we want to do is, ideally, I would prefer that if you saw that column of smoke, you would recognize for yourself, it's time to get out. And I'm going to start making sure that I get out. The sooner you guys get yourselves out and are safe and the roadway is clear for us to be able to come in, the better. So we do have a lot of systems in place that we can notify people through SMC Alert and iPause, and there's a bunch of systems out there. We can interrupt your TV programming and your radio programming and all that, but it takes time. And we're talking about highly populated areas within the WUI, the Wildland Urban Interface. We want you to feel empowered that if you see something that makes you in any way uncomfortable, leave. You can go down to Industrial and stop at the Starbucks there and watch the hills and see what happens and decide to go back very quickly afterwards. But I would much rather have you decide to do that early rather than wait for notification from us. We will get that notification out to you as rapidly as we can with the best information that we can, but don't wait. Once we have an incident established and we understand what's happening, then we can set up a series of trigger points and evacuation zones we do this all the time every summer, where if the fire reaches this point, then these are the areas that we need to evacuate, and so on and so on. And that gets pretty simple, actually, at the end of the day. It's the initial response that we need the community to be empowered to say, it's time for me to go. I need to make sure that I get my relatives, my neighbor who needs help, whatever it is with your plan, and we'll talk about that. What's the difference between a warning versus an order? A warning is basically us reaching out to you saying, we think we're going to call you at some point to leave, but we're not saying that you have to leave right now. Okay, that's generally 12 hours ahead of when we think that fire is going to impact that area. It's a ways away. Okay, so what we're talking about with a warning is something that has been established and burning for several days, and we're leaning forward, notifying somebody that they need to be on alert, ready to go. An order is saying, get out now. Okay, in California, the reality between mandatory evacuation versus voluntary is we can't, if we say you should leave your house and you say, I'm staying, we're not going to come and arrest you, okay? Ultimately, it comes down to that individual's choice. Every summer we have people who say we're staying in our house because we think we can defend it, and we will say, okay, if the fire reaches you, we're not going to be able to get back to you. If the fire reaches you, we will not be able to help you. You're on your own. This could kill you. I mean, we have to inform people very firmly. And some people in some parts of the state still choose to stay behind. There are people who have spent a lot of time protecting their home, building water supplies around their homes to be able to defend it, and that's what they choose to do. And sometimes we do see fatalities because of that. When you are considering your evacuation route, remember what we're seeing, the fatalities that we see when evacuations are necessary are the very young and the very old. So you need to make sure that if there's somebody with access and functional needs, that you need to be ready for that. And look at your travel routes and which way you're going to have to get out. We talked about areas of refuge. The areas of town that you should be thinking of to get to would be along that El Camino corridor and the industrial area. And be aware of what you're going to have to do ahead of time. I have a video coming up in just a few minutes that's really going to dig into this. Situational awareness. When there's hot offshore winds, what does that feel like at your house? For me, when all my neighbors' leaves blow into my front porch, that's offshore winds for me. So I know that's what I'm looking at. So know what that means for you. And then, we're looking at a lot of different things for alerting, early detection, and we'll be delivering information to you and get some community input on that as we develop those ideas as we go further forward. So what's the city doing to prepare? Education, just trying to meet with as many people as we can. We do have pamphlets. You have workbooks that we've given out to you today. We really want you to go through those. San Carlos is getting close to about $1 million in grant funds that we've received for fuels management. So you're going to be seeing some work going on at city-owned lots throughout the city coming up very quickly. We do wildland urban interface inspections. Have any of you received a knock on the door from one of our engine companies talking about some weed abatement that needs to happen? We do that, and then we also do enforcement through code enforcement. We are doing an evacuation drill coming up. We meet with a consultant this week, and you'll be hearing more about that. We're going to try to get some community participation to actually do a test of our roadways and how we can evacuate people out of a neighborhood. And they're doing a mapping and fuel modeling project right now that got funded by the Board of Supervisors, and that is going to be a countywide project where we really have some very good data on evacuation routes for individual neighborhoods, stock of how many homes are in those areas and that kind of thing. So we'll be moving forward with that. How many of you, by raising your hands, have signed up for SMC Alert? Okay, pretty good. There's pamphlets on your table for anyone that hasn't signed up for that. Really good to sign up. Right now, it's opt-in. They're going to be changing to an opt-out model. So we want to get as many people signed up as possible, okay? I'm going to be delivering some information to you about a program called Ready, Set, Go, which you'll see the video on. And it's going to talk about defensible space, how you can harden your home, have a plan and practice it, especially if you have smaller kids. I recommend actually practicing doing this, and then don't wait to evacuate. So that's next.
Massive wildfire exploded early Thursday morning, burning nearly 25,000 acres.
The fire has forced new evacuations this morning.
The fire moved up a ridgeline and then caught the Santa Ana winds perfectly.
In the summer of 2008, nearly 2,000 lightning-sparked wildfires scorched over 1 million acres across California, destroying hundreds of structures and impacting the lives in the surrounding communities forever.
I never thought it was going to happen to me. You know, you always figure it's the other guy that's going to get their house burned.
And with California's Mediterranean climate, another fire siege of that magnitude is just a matter of time. I'm CAL FIRE's Daniel Berlant. Devastating wildfires occur every year across the state, putting lives, property, and the state's natural resources at a constant threat. In California, wildfires aren't a question of if, but only a question of when. If you choose to live near a natural area of the state, you are at risk for wildfires, and it's your responsibility to prepare yourself, your family, and your home. And that preparation starts with 3 simple steps. Ready, set, go. Getting ready before wildfire happens is a vital first step in protecting yourself and your property. Beginning in the spring months, well before the peak of fire season, you should carefully assess your property and start taking steps to prepare for the hotter months to come.
As firefighters are responding to fires throughout California, one of the most important things they can look for is defensible space.
Defensible space is the required 100 feet between your property and the surrounding wildland area. Defensible space has consistently been shown to be the best, most practical first line of defense for your home against wildfires. Adequate defensible space provides a barrier to slow, or in some cases even halt, the progress of fire that would otherwise engulf your property. It also helps ensure the safety of firefighters while they defend your home.
I'm going to have to go to homes that provide some type of clearance for my firefighters. I cannot go to a home that has brush and everything growing right up to it. I've got to pick a home where I can safely make a stand, and if we get stuck there, that we can survive it as well.
When the destructive lightning siege fires burned throughout California in 2008, defensible space once again proved to be a key element around the homes that survived, while many homes without adequate clearance were not as fortunate. But defensible space isn't the only factor in protecting your property. Another critical step is hardening your home. During a wildfire, loose flying embers can find weak points on the outside of your home. Hardening your home means reinforcing these vulnerabilities. CAL FIRE Battalion Chief Nick Schuler demonstrates some of the components of a well-defended home.
As you see here, they have an excellent green belt around their home. All of their trees are limbed up, so there's no dead and dying vegetation around their home. And as you can see, as we walk along, all the leaf litter's been picked up, and we move straight into the fire-resistant construction. They have the stucco siding, they have the enclosed eaves, and the composite roof, all proactive steps that this homeowner's taken to reduce fire potential.
Now that you have your home ready for a wildfire, it's time to get set by preparing your most valuable assets, your life and the lives of your family. You should start by creating a wildfire action plan. A wildfire action plan gives you and your family a chance to plan out and write down important information and special preparations that you'll need to take as a wildfire approaches.
As part of your wildfire action plan, you want to sit down with your family and talk about things like escape routes, what roads are you going to take when you leave the house, and the other thing is where are you going to go. You want to have a meeting location.
Your family's plan will be unique depending on your circumstances, so it's vital that you practice and update it regularly to keep everybody prepared. It's also important to plan which belongings in your house you'll need to take with you in case of evacuation if you have time.
Prepare what you're going to take with you when you leave. There's nothing worse than packing up to leave and you realize you didn't take anything that you really wanted to. You took stuff that just was the first thing you saw.
Wildfires can move quickly and can change direction into a surrounding community without warning. With the assurance that your home is now well defended and your family's wildfire action plan in place, when a wildfire approaches, you're now ready to go. During a wildfire, emergency personnel may not be able to warn everybody, so it's up to you to take the initiative to stay informed by listening to the TV or radio for announcements. If an evacuation is imminent, it's time to set your wildfire action plan into motion. Don't wait to be ordered to leave your residence, just go, and go early. By leaving early, you give your family the best chance of surviving a wildfire.
Follow the directions of fire and law enforcement, and if you feel threatened, you need to go ahead and get out of that home. We have a lot of systems in place to notify you of that, but you have to be willing to get out and get out early.
Although wildfires can be unpredictable, destructive, and deadly, they're an undeniable part of California's wildland. Wildfire is coming, and it's the steps you take now that will ensure you, your family, and your home have a fighting chance when it happens. For more information on how to prepare for wildfires and for a wildfire action plan checklist, visit readyforwildfire.org.
Okay, I really encourage you to visit that website. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to the Sheriff's Office now to talk a little bit about evacuation routes, and we're going to wrap up pretty quick here.
I want to make this pretty quick. The chief in the video actually did a great job of summarizing what you need to know as far as evacuation preparation. As far as putting together your evacuation action plan, that's something you can do as a family, as an exercise, or just an evening in at the house. It also creates a dialogue. It could be an opportunity to ask some hard questions on what you would do and how you would proceed. Getting information, documents, pictures, things of that nature together ahead of time and keep them secure still. That will be one less thing that you have to do when it's time to go. We encourage you to try to remain calm. You can't help others if you can't help yourself. That includes your family. You have to help yourself first before you can help your family, your neighbors, your loved ones. Most of you have lived in San Carlos, I think from what I saw, for quite some time. You're probably all very familiar with a lot of the routes that are highlighted up there. We're talking San Carlos Avenue, El Camino, Industrial, Holly, Britton, Howard, all those avenues. Everyone is probably driven on at one point in time. My question to you is, what about some of the side streets? How many of those streets have you ever driven on that you don't even know the name of? In the case of an evacuation, it's a good idea to be aware of what street you're on. Because if something were to happen where you're stuck or you need help or assistance, get an idea when you make a turn, take a look at the sign. What street did I just turn on? Again, this could be another fun exercise with your family. Go for a drive. Go for a walk around your neighborhood. Get an idea of the layout. But these routes, keep in mind, we mentioned that the infrastructure for San Carlos was designed 20, 30, 40s, 50s maybe, and we've had so much growth in the Bay Area in general. We all have seen the traffic impact. Imagine in the case of an evacuation where we'd want to move. Having alternative routes will really help us. Generally, we're going to probably want to move more in an easterly direction towards that El Camino Industrial 101 corridor where there are way more avenues of egress. It just all depends. You have to be fluid and you have to be prepared to adjust as needed. So again, I don't want to take up much more time. I know you have a lot of other fun things to be doing here today, but I'm going to turn it back over to the chief.
Okay, I'm in trouble because I talked too long. So we're going to get you down into your subgroups. One of the things when we do our breakouts is the facilitators have a series of questions to ask for input. One of the things that I would like input from you is on fire detection cameras. There is technology out there that is a series of cameras that can be put into the wildland interface. And some of them are videos, some of them are thermal. There's a lot of technology out there that we're looking at. But I want to know how you feel about having cameras in that area, in your neighborhood, and what your general sense is. Versus, no, I think we called 911 quickly enough, or whatever your feeling is, I'd like to get that from you. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn over to Debbie, and we'll talk.
Thanks. So we're just going to take a couple of questions because we want to get you the chance to give your input. So facilitators, have you collected any questions? I see Kay has one. Tara, do you have any questions? Oh, great. Okay. Let's see. Thank you. So this is a question about evacuation routes. We live at the Belmont end of Crestview. If we are blocked from going south on Crestview or getting down Club Drive, would we be able to get out via Hallmark, which is normally blocked?
That's being discussed. Actually, that's at a political level right now. Right now, that gate's about 10 feet wide. We can get an engine through very, very slowly. That's something that is being worked on the political level. For the short term, if I lived up there, I'd be looking at a partnership with a friend of mine that maybe lives on the Hallmark side. And that way I know I've got a buddy that can give me a ride on Hallmark, and then I can give him a ride if he needs to come from Belmont and go out Crestview. So that's the kind of relationships we want you to start thinking about.
So we have a couple questions that have to do with the danger that neighbors' homes may pose due to shake roofs or vegetation on neighbors' property.
What we do is so you can call the fire department and tell us what your concern is. We will go out there and look at the property. We do have avenues through the Wildland Urban Interface Inspection Program to take enforcement action as necessary. I believe we did about 1,700 code violations last year related to wildland fires. So it's something we deal with very aggressively. We try to get people to correct it first. Obviously, we don't want to go code enforcement route, but it starts with education, and we can go code enforcement as well.
If I don't have a smartphone, would my cell phone still get a warning?
Yes. So the SMC alert system alerts a number of different ways. One of them is including a phone call with a voice message.
This is a question about, are there foam pre-treatment kits available for home use?
Not that I'm familiar with. There are some industrial applications of foam in the wildland. You see with like PG&E will go out and pre-treat the metal power pole, or excuse me, the wood power poles ahead of time. I have not seen that done on a residential process. We can, the fire department can. I wouldn't recommend that anyone from public do that.
All right, this is the last question, but all of these questions will get answered eventually, just not today. How do I request a wildland urban interface inspection?
Just call us. Just call our business line, and we can send somebody out. I had a lot of questions concerning the fire detection cameras from all the different tables, and so I want to clarify what we're looking for. So there are technologies out there where a camera can be posted in an open space and have software that would alert us to a new start. In the city of San Carlos, we typically get a lot of 911 calls for fires that happen, but you could have something late at night or maybe along that 280 corridor that the cameras might be able to locate. So my question for the group is do you see the value in something, because these are expensive systems? What's the benefit? Does it actually help us with response times? And how do you feel about those privacy aspects of having it's a government-owned camera that could be covering part of your property, part of your house, that kind of thing? What your gut reaction to that is, so I have an idea of what you guys are thinking. PG&E is looking at doing some things along the 280 corridor, along their power infrastructure, and that makes sense to me because that's uninhabited. It's around a likely location where a fire could start, and a little less inhabited. But within the neighborhoods, how do you feel about that? Does that make sense? Okay, thanks. Everybody's good? Okay, well, what'd you all think? Was this helpful? Okay, good. This is actually this is the first one that we've done of these. So we're really curious on what kind of feedback we're going to get from you. So please, I really encourage you to do those evaluations so we can get the feedback and make sure that we're delivering to you what you want to get from us. Next steps, we have another one of these. It's going to be happening at Tuesday night, 7 p.m., Hiller Aviation Museum. And I highly encourage you to go back to your communities, your neighborhoods, and say, hey, if you haven't signed up, you really should go to this. You guys I think most of you use that sign up link. Tell them to use that. That gives us a good idea of how many tables and everything to set up. And what we're going to do with this data, everything that you gave us, as well as the comment cards that you handed me and other individuals, we'll compile that data and put it together. We'll post that on the website so you can see what feedback you're giving us, what we're doing well, what you want to see more from us, and that kind of thing. So thank you for your input. It was all very, very helpful. I'm going to turn it over to Debbie to close things out, but we'll be here for a little while after if you want to come up and talk. That's great. So thank you for your help today. Appreciate it.